Hello yarn lovers and welcome to my channel. Today I am going to be showing you how to create a linen stitch triangle as well as the pattern for the for the boho shawl that you see here behind me. This pattern is completely beginner friendly. I will have a written pattern on my website and on my Etsy, so be on the lookout for that. Alright, so let's get into the yarn that we're going to need. For this pattern, I use the Yarn Bee Sugar Wheel from Hobby Lobby. This is a worsted weight yarn and it calls for a 5.5 millimeter hook. I do recommend with the moss stitch because it can be a very dense stitch. I'm sorry, the linen stitch. It's also called the moss stitch. Because it can be very dense, I recommend that you size up on your hook. So I'm going to be using a 7 millimeter hook for this tutorial, and I also did use a 7 millimeter hook for the actual shawl as well. You're also going to need scissors, a tapestry needle, and a book that is about 8.5 to 9.5 inches long to create the fringe that you see on the bottom of the border. Alright, so we've discussed all of our supplies and our yarn, so let's get into our pattern. This shawl works up so fast and is absolutely beginner friendly. We are going to start by making our slip knot. And then we're going to put that on our hook and we're going to go ahead and tighten that down and create our magic ring, which I do slightly differently. We're going to make our first chains fairly loosely and then we're going to chain one. We're going to single crochet into that first loop that we made, working that tail over so that we can single crochet over that tail. Now we're going to single crochet again and bring the tail over again in the other direction. And we're going to chain two and single crochet two, being sure to make sure that you single crochet over that tail. This is going to help us so that when we tighten that down, it'll cinch up that little hole that you see in the middle there. Now chain one, and we're going to single crochet two into the first single crochet of the row below. This is the only actual single crochet that we will actually work a stitch in. Every other single crochet will be into the chain one space and the chain two space. So chain one, and we'll skip that next single crochet and single crochet into our chain two space. We'll chain two and single crochet again into that chain two space. Chain one, skip the next single crochet, and then we're going to single crochet two single crochet stitches into that last stitch. All right. And now you can pull that tail and tighten down, and you'll see that that hole closes right up. So chain one and turn your work. So we're going to single crochet two into that first single crochet, and then we'll follow that up with a chain one, skipping that next single crochet and single crocheting into that chain one space. Chain one, and we're at our point, so we're going to do the single crochet one, chain two, and single crochet one into that same chain two space. Then chain one, skip that single crochet and single crochet into the chain one space, chain one, skip the next single crochet, and put two single crochet into that last stitch. And we can now move on to our next row. So chain one and turn your work. We're going to single crochet two into that first stitch, remembering that's the only actual single crochet we're going to work into. And then we're going to chain one, skip that next single crochet, and then single crochet one into the next chain one space. And we'll continue that until we get to our point. And once we get to that point, we're going to do that pattern repeat again of one single crochet, chain 2, sorry, let's try that again. 1 single crochet, chain 2, and then 1 single crochet, all into that chain 2 space. And we'll chain 1, skipping 1 single crochet, and single crocheting into the chain 2 space until we get to that last single crochet of the row. Once we get to that last single crochet, we're going to single crochet 2 into that stitch. And then we're going to chain 1 and turn our work. And let's do another row. So into that first single crochet, we're going to single crochet 2, chain 1, skip 1, and then single crochet into that first chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip 1, single crochet. Continue that until you reach your point. And at your point, you're going to single crochet 1, chain 2, single crochet 1, and then you're going to chain 1 again and continue that single crochet chain 1 until you get down to that last stitch of the row. And remember, we're only placing single crochets into our chain 2 spaces. We're skipping our single crochets on the row below. So our right in our corner, we're going to put those 2 single crochets into that last single crochet stitch below. And as you can see, we have a nice even triangle. You will definitely enjoy how quick this piece is going to work up. So we've completed 5 rows. And you can count your rows by counting your single crochets made in the point stitch as you see here. Now you can pause the video and create 5 more rows and join me back here once you've done that and we'll continue the pattern. Welcome back, and now you should have 10 rows as you see here. So we're going to have our last 2 single crochet left, and I'm going to show you how you would add another skein of yarn because this project requires 3 skeins of the sugar wool yarn. So after completing our chain 1, we're going to skip that next single crochet, and we're going to single crochet 2 single crochet stitches into that last single crochet. Leave 2 loops on your hook, and you'll cut away the working yarn, which I've already done. You're going to pull that new working yarn over your hook, and then pull it through those last 2 stitches, making sure to tighten down all of those ends, and then chain 1. And then we're going to turn our work after we've tightened everything down. So now we're going to work over those 2 tails that were created by putting those on our hook before we create that first single crochet. And we're going to put those first 2 single crochet into that first stitch. And that's just so we can secure those tails in, and then we'll sew those in later. So now put that next single crochet, and you're going to chain 1, skip the next single crochet, and then single crochet into the next chain 1 space, and we will continue our pattern until we get to the point by completing our chain 1, skip 1, single crochet into the chain 1 space, chain 1, skip 1, and single crochet into the chain 1 space of the row below, all the way up until we get to our point. So chain 1, skip a single crochet below, and then single crochet into the chain 1 space. Chain 1, and single crochet again into that chain 1 space of the row below. And then 1 more, and we're going to be at our point where we'll do our single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. And now you're going to finish that chain 1, single crochet 1, until you get down to those last 2 single crochet of this row. This pattern is so beginner friendly. You guys are going to really enjoy working this up. It works up really quickly. And the texture of the yarn is really lovely too. Definitely for an acrylic. So we're almost at those last 2 stitches. We're going to now chain 1, skip that first single crochet, and single crochet 2 into that last single crochet stitch on the row below. And now we can admire our work. We've created a beautiful triangle using the linen stitch for our boho shawl. If you want to continue, the complete pattern does have a total of 79 rows before you get to the border, and then 2 rows of puff stitches, and then the fringe. But we're just going to do a simple swatch here so that you'll know how to work the pattern up if you want to purchase the written pattern, which is available on my website and my Etsy. Alrighty. And what I really like about the linen stitch is that it's completely reversible, which allows you to enjoy both sides of your project. Alright, so now we can go ahead and fasten off. To do that, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to cut our working yarn away and pull that tail up through that loop and tighten it down. And now we can get ready to start working on our border. So for our border, we're going to be working in the beautiful puff stitch, which I just can't get enough of. I have another video on the puff stitch. If you're not familiar with it, you can watch that video and you'll learn how to do that stitch step by step. Here we're going to do a standing puff stitch, and we're going to make sure that we turn the project over so that we're working on the opposite side that we just worked. In that last single crochet stitch, we're going to yarn over, insert our hook, and we're going to loosely pull up a loop, and we're going to yarn over, go through, pull up a loop, yarn over, insert, and pull up a loop. You'll have 7 loops on your hook, and then you'll pull through all of the loops that you've created, and then you're going to chain 1 and chain 1 again. So just as we did with our linen stitch, we're going to skip our single crochets and we're going to place our puff stitches only in our chain 1 spaces and our chain 2 spaces when we get to our point. So again, for our puff stitch, we're going to yarn over, go through that chain space, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull up a loop. Actually, I think I put too many on there, so let's take 2 of those off. And then we're going to pull through all 7 of those loops that we created and chain 1 again, skip that single crochet, and place that puff stitch into that next chain 1 space. Once you've completed your puff stitch, you're going to chain 1 again, skip the single crochet, and place the puff stitch into your next chain 1 space. Pull through all the loops you've created, chain 1, and chain 1 again. You're going to do your 3 yarn over and pull throughs, and then pull through all the loops that you've created to complete your puff stitch. And we're going to do it again, remembering to skip the single crochet and place the puff stitch into the chain 1 space, just as we did the linen stitch. Alright, so we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to place that puff stitch into that next chain 1 space below, do our 3 yarn over and pull throughs, pull through all of our loops, chain 1, and then we're going to chain 1 again, and we're going to create our point, which is pretty much a V puff stitch. So we're going to create 1 puff stitch, and then we're going to chain 1 again, and chain 1 again. So this one has 3 chains, and then we'll create our next puff stitch, and we'll chain 1 again, and then we'll create our puff stitch. Chain 1 again, and create our puff stitch. Alrighty, so we are at our last puff stitch. You're going to chain 1, and we're going to place our last puff into that last single crochet. So pull up a loop, pull up another loop, and pull up your 3rd loop. You'll have 7 loops on your hook. Pull through all 7 of those loops, close that up with a chain 1, and now you can see those beautiful puff stitches that are accenting that border in such a lovely way. So we're going to chain 1, and now we're going to find that first chain space, and we're going to put a puff stitch into that first chain space there. So pull up a loop, insert your hook, pull up a loop, insert your hook, and pull up a loop. And we're going to pull through all of those loops that we created to close that puff stitch, and then we're going to chain one again, and we're going to continue that all the way around, creating those beautiful puff stitches to give us a nice, lovely, fluffy border that is going to help our fringe flow so much better with this piece. And remember, when we're working this row of puff stitches, we are also only working the puffs into the chain 2 spaces. All of our stitches on this project are always worked into our chain spaces unless we are working on our first single crochet of the row or the last single crochet ending the row. So now we're back at our point. We're going to do that V puff stitch again by creating a puff stitch, by doing our 3 yarn overs, and we're going to pull through all of those, and we're going to chain 3 and create another puff stitch. And once we've created that last puff stitch for our point, we are going to chain 2, and we're going to place puff stitches all the way down in our chain spaces until we get to the last puff stitch of our row. So again, the puff stitch is a yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and pull through, and then pull through all of the loops that you've created. Close that puff stitch with a chain 1. All right. So we have this last puff stitch here before we get to our final one of the round, which is a little bit different because we started with a standing puff stitch. So that extra loop that we have there, we're going to take and we're going to push that forward. And then we're going to take our hook once we've pushed that forward, and we're going to work through that last chain as well as the first part of the chain that was created when we made our standing puff, so that we can close both of those stitches up together in that last puff stitch. And then it'll close that tail in a little bit more so that when you sew it in, it'll be really, really secure. All right. So now we have finished our border. We can chain 1, and we can cut that working yarn away. All right, so now we have completed our border, and we can admire this for a moment before we add on our fringe. As you can see, the border causes the piece to curl in just slightly, but when you add the fringe, the weight of the fringe will pull that right back out. And you also don't have to add the border if you don't want to. The shawl is quite large, so if you just wanted to do the linen stitch part, you could only do that. You don't have to add the puff stitch border, or you can just do a puff stitch border. So now I'm going to show you how we create our fringe. You're going to get a book that's about 9.5 to 8.5 inches, and we're going to start by wrapping our yarn around the book continuously until we get a nice amount of yarn on our book. You don't want to put too much yarn on the book because it can get quite heavy once you've done this several times, but you do want to get a nice amount so that you don't have to do it too many times. And then once you've worked that over several times very loosely, making sure that you try not to have any kind of tension at all on this because it's going to pull back when you cut it. So when I cut, I like to hold it down flat onto a surface, and then I'll cut away as I'm holding the yarn at the top to keep it from pulling back. If you don't hold it, all your little strands will start to bounce back like little broken rubber bands, and that'll just be extra work that you'll have to do to try to even those strands back up. So as you can see, when I release those, they all pull back at an even level. Now, if you're not going to work on your fringe right away, say that you're going to put this up for another day, you can tie this to keep your fringe pieces from going all over the place. What I like to do is create a simple knot and just bring that over and bring all of those pieces through so that they're not just flailing around. And I'll put that in my craft bag if I'm going to work on that later. Alrighty. So I created another color of the fringe off camera. And again, I'm just going to show you how I cut that away. And we have our 2 different colors for our border. When you're actually creating your project, the fringe with this yarn is going to have about 3 different colors in it. And you don't have to separate the colors if you don't want. I like to do that because I want to continue the ombre effect into the fringe on the border. So now, since we are going to use this today, I'm going to go ahead and take that knot out. As you can see, it's really easy to do and it does not disrupt the flow of your yarn. You'll still have very straight pieces. Sorry about that. All right. So the fringe has 6 pieces in total. So you'll pull 3 from one and 3 from the next, or however you want to pull to get your 6 pieces. And then once you have those, you're going to put them together and you're going to create a loop on your finger so that the end has a nice little loop that you can fit your crochet hook through. You're going to need space because you don't want to try to do this in a tight space because it's a lot of loops on there or a lot of threads on there. So you're going to use your hook. If you need to, you can use a bigger hook. For our first piece of fringe, we're going to place it into that last stitch, or I'm sorry, the last chain space. And then you're going to pull that down to get that fringe to hold into place really well. And so for the boho shawl, you will skip, for this first one, you'll skip 3 spaces because we put our first fringe on the end. So you'll skip 3 spaces and place your first piece of fringe in the 4th chain 2 space of your border. And again, we're going to make sure though those are even. Create a little loop at the top, skip those first 4, place our hook, and pull all of those strands through. Now we're going to lift that up, put our fingers through there, pull those through, and then pull down. And if you have a strand that didn't pull evenly, you can always go in there and individually pull those strands to make sure that they all have a consistent look. So now we're only going to skip 2 chain spaces. And we're going to skip 2 chain spaces and add 1 piece of fringe until we get to our point. So again, to add the fringe, we're going to have 6 of our yarn threads, or our yarn strands, pull up a little loop there, and pull those through on your hook. Pull up a nice little loop on the other side so that you can pull your fingers through there and pull all those strands through and tighten those down. And now we have created beautiful fringe for our project. As you can see here, this is a small sample, but this is a good example of what our full project will look like. If you want to keep this sample, I'm pretty sure your pet may like it as maybe like a little scarf or something like that. The yarn has a very, very beautiful ombre effect to it, which gives it like this self-striping, which I really, really love. And I try to follow that into the border of this piece. So again, the full pattern has 79 rows. And if you want the written pattern, it is going to be available on my website and my Etsy. And of course, my cat had to come and model our swatch for us. Please like, follow, and subscribe for more content, and follow me on my other social media platforms under Impressions by Tay. If you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, feel free to tag me. I would love to see your finished pieces.